In the early 2010s, something significant changed for adolescents, and the shift was too substantial to dismiss as ordinary stress. Rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide increased sharply, with girls showing the steepest rise. The rise was observed across many countries and social groups, making a purely local explanation much less convincing. It also appeared mostly before the pandemic, so the core shift cannot be attributed solely to lockdowns. The crisis centered on internal distress, not just external behavior, pointing toward deeper changes in daily experience. Emergency care data supported this case, as self-reports were backed by real behavioral signs of suffering. A new childhood environment emerged just as Generation Z entered its most vulnerable years of development. Phones, social media, and constant digital access altered attention, friendships, sleep, and the sense of social safety. Next, we will explore how childhood was first altered in the real world and then remade online. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt clearly frames this turning point. Subscribe to the channel for careful breakdowns of childhood and mental health. Human childhood is unusually long because children are not just growing bodies, they are also learning a culture. Brains reach much of their size early, yet years remain for experience to shape which pathways get strengthened. That long apprenticeship depends on free play, attunement, imitation, and repeated contact with nearby people. Children learn turn-taking, conflict repair, timing, and shared attention by doing things together in real time. They also copy what seems common and what seems prestigious, which helps them absorb local norms. These learning systems work best inside enduring communities where names, faces, and consequences stay connected. Social media interrupts this process by making interaction more performative, asynchronous, and detached from local accountability. Instead of bonding through embodied play, heavy users absorb cues from influencers chosen by engagement systems. The result is not richer social development, but weaker attunement and a growing hunger for real connection. Before the crisis can be understood, childhood itself must be seen as a training ground, not a waiting room. In the late 20th century, adults grew more fearful and began restricting the freedom that children once expected. Play outside, walking alone, and unsupervised adventures declined, even as many real-world dangers were falling. That change mattered because children are anti-fragile and develop strength by handling manageable risks and setbacks. Risky play helps them test fear, build competence, and return from trouble with greater confidence. When adults keep children too close to home base, growth slows and anxiety finds more room. The real world became overprotected, just as the virtual world remained shockingly open to minors. Children were blocked from ordinary independence outside, while being left to wander through adult online spaces. That swap looked safer, yet it removed practice in friendship, repair, courage, and self-direction. Small mistakes in play usually end with learning, but mistakes online can spread widely and linger. This mismatch helps explain why caution in one world and freedom in another produced more fragility, not less. Puberty is a sensitive period when the brain rewires rapidly in response to repeated activity and reward. Between roughly ages 9 and 15, lessons learned can imprint deeply because plasticity is especially high. If those years are filled with activities like archery, art, work, and friendship, the brain is shaped accordingly. If they are filled with scrolling, image management, gaming, and compulsive checking, that pattern also sticks. Adolescents therefore need more than information. They need experiences that guide them toward adulthood. Older cultures used rites of passage, responsibility, and community recognition to mark real developmental movement. Modern childhood often offers the opposite, with fewer milestones, fewer duties, and more passive consumption. Phones and overprotection act like experience blockers that delay autonomy without reducing inner pressure. Block transition is a developmental problem, not just a problem of manners or motivation. Without a clearer path to earned freedom, puberty becomes more confusing, more isolating, and easier for platforms to capture. The smartphone-based childhood emerged when adolescents became accustomed to constant internet access, apps, and smartphones. This shift introduced 4 foundational harms that affect development from multiple angles simultaneously. First, social deprivation occurs as screen time replaces face-to-face interactions, reducing opportunities for touch, eye contact, and shared presence. Second, sleep deprivation results from phones invading bedrooms, delaying bedtime, and keeping minds active through the night. Third, attention fragmentation arises from notifications and endless feeds, training the mind to break focus repeatedly. Fourth, addiction develops as reward-driven apps compete to keep vulnerable users returning again and again. These harms interact rather than operate independently, amplifying the overall damage. Poor sleep weakens emotion regulation, broken attention hinders learning, and social thinning deepens loneliness. Together, these factors help explain why the same devices can disrupt school, relationships, mood, and self-control. If these patterns describe your own world, subscribe to the channel to understand the mechanisms and take the first step toward changing them. Girls were hit especially hard because social media transforms belonging into display, judgment, comparison, and reputation management. Many girls spend more time on visually oriented platforms where faces, bodies, and status are constantly evaluated. This environment directly impacts the sociometer, the inner gauge of where someone stands with others. It also amplifies socially prescribed perfectionism by making impossible standards feel public, continuous, and unavoidable. Relational aggression gains new force online because exclusion, rumor, humiliation, and pile-on scale easily. Emotion sharing can spread distress too, especially when anxious girls become hyper-connected to one another's pain. Predatory contact adds another burden because older men can more easily approach girls while hiding accountability. Pressure from local boys also changes when image sharing and sexual coercion travel through phones. The promise of communion remains powerful, yet the quality of connection often diminishes as the number of contacts rises. That is why loneliness can spike even when a girl seems socially surrounded almost every waking hour. Boys took a different path into distress, one shaped more by immersive escape than by display. An overprotective culture reduced opportunities for agency, adventure, work, and peer recognition. The virtual world then provided instant substitutes through games, pornography, online communities, and later gambling or dating apps. These products satisfied desires quickly while demanding far less social and physical risk. Older multiplayer games once kept boys together with friends and siblings, sharing jokes, food, and excitement. Network devices increasingly moved that life into private rooms with strangers, offering stimulation and endless repetition. Heavy use can crowd out sleep, school, dating, and the conversational fluency built through ordinary time with others. This pattern helps explain why movement into adult roles becomes slower and shakier. Instead of practicing adulthood, many boys practice consumption, retreat, and attention capture under commercial conditions. While this problem may appear quiet at first, the long-term costs can be immense. The damage is not only clinical, a phone-dominated life can also flatten attention, meaning, and reverence. Real-world relationships are embodied, synchronous, and rooted in communities that demand repair when conflict arises. Online life is more disembodied, asynchronous, one-to-many, and easier to exit without repair. That shift weakens habits needed for patience, self-command, depth, and concern for others. Children are not the only ones affected. Adults too become scattered, reactive, and forever elsewhere. This broader decline can be understood as a movement downward on a spiritual dimension of life. The loss is visible without theology. Shared presence, stillness, and disciplined attention visibly erode. Ancient wisdom traditions offer practical correctives that help people regain control of their minds and behaviours. The core point is simple. A world built to capture attention also degrades the quality of consciousness. Any recovery worthy of the name must restore time, embodiment, and forms of togetherness that screens cannot replace. No family can solve this alone, as the crisis is organised by collective action problems. Parents fear making changes if every other child keeps the same devices, rules, and digital habits. The book therefore argues for 4 foundational reforms that communities should adopt together. The first is no smartphones before high school, using basic phones instead of full internet portals. The second is no social media before 16, delaying exposure during the most vulnerable developmental window. The third is phone-free schools, where attention can return to teachers, classmates, and the work itself. The fourth is far more unsupervised play and childhood independence in neighbourhoods, parks, and daily routines. Governments can narrow neglect laws and raise internet adulthood, while tech companies improve age verification and duty of care. Schools can become phone-free and playful, and parents can act more like gardeners than carpenters. Once communities move together, these reforms stop feeling extreme and start looking like ordinary child protection. The central question is not whether technology brings benefits, as adults clearly gain many useful ones from it. The question is whether minors should face adult-designed platforms during the years when brains and identities are most malleable. The answer offered here is no, not until childhood regains more freedom, protection, and real-world practice. Healthier development requires more embodied friendship, more independence, more sleep, and fewer engines of constant comparison. It also requires adults to stop misallocating protection by supervising playgrounds while neglecting digital environments. Bringing childhood back to earth means changing defaults so that courage, play, and community can develop earlier. The reforms are simple, low cost, and strongest when families, schools, governments, and companies move together. The book also leaves room for hope because young people are not in denial and can organise for change. What changes first is not every child at once, but the environment that teaches children what childhood is for. If you want more grounded discussions like this, then subscribe to the channel so we can keep turning complex books into practical public conversation.